over on that side. Okay, nobody. Well, good afternoon, Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and welcome to the GCSP. It's a pleasure to have you here for GCSP's 16th Geneva Security Debate. I'm honored to be chairing this debate today. My name is Paul Jatkovets. I'm the director here at GCSP of the Mediation and Peace Support Department, where we focus on facilitating discrete dialogue in various regions of the world with a view to helping avoid or resolve conflicts or help manage diplomatic tensions. Prior to arriving at GCSP nearly 2 years ago, I worked for a decade in conflict mediation, including in Ukraine and a few other countries. And before that, over a decade as a diplomat. Before we start with the discussions, I would like to thank a few partners for their support for today's event, namely the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Iraq to the United Nations in Geneva, the Iraqi Foundation for Foreign Policies, the Al-Basheer Foundation for Development, and the Iraqi Commission of Media and Communications. Let me briefly introduce our first two speakers today. After they have delivered their opening presentations, I will then introduce the panelists here on the podium. In the interest of time, I'll only give a brief introduction since all of you have the detailed bios on your chairs here or digitally on the GCSP website. Our first speaker will be Ambassador Thomas Gramingo. He is a highly experienced Swiss diplomat and now director of the GCSP. Prior to taking up his current role, Ambassador Gramingo was the Secretary General of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, from 2017 to 2020. In this capacity, he was, and he needed to be, an effective crisis manager, supporting successive OSCE chairmanships in an increasingly polarized environment, to promote dialogue among the 57 OSCE participating states. Among many other roles, he headed the Human Security Division of the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs and was also the Deputy Director General of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. Our second speaker after Ambassador Gramingo will be His Excellency Ambassador Abdul-Karim Hashim Mustafa. He is since 2021 the permanent representative of Iraq to the United Nations in Geneva. Prior to this post, he was from 2019 the Senior Undersecretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iraq. He served as advisor to the Prime Minister of Iraq for Diplomatic and International Affairs from 2018 to 2019. He has also been the ambassador of Iraq to China, Morocco, and Russia. So today we're going to discuss the role of the media in conflict resolution, in peace building, and in reconciliation. Some of our panelists will highlight the work that has been done in the domain, specifically in Iraq, and we will also widen our lens to incorporate some additional ideas at the nexus of media and conflict, also beyond Iraq. So I'll now give the floor to the director of the GCSP, Ambassador Gramingo. The floor is yours.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's once again with great pleasure that I welcome you all to this edition of our Geneva security debates, 2 hour center, the GCSP. As Paul has said, it's the 16th edition. I think that shows that these Geneva security debates are becoming a success story. Today's debate is entitled The Role of Media in Conflict Resolution, Peace Building and Reconciliation in the MENA, Iraq as a model. As I have mentioned at all previous editions of these Geneva security debates, And please, for those that are loyal participants of these debates, please bear with me. For those that are new to our discussions, please allow me to just give you briefly some background on these series of events that we host here at the Centre. So these Geneva security debates is a series of public discussions. They explore pressing and current security challenges. We do that by and large on a monthly basis, and we bring together leading thinkers, experts, and policymakers for normally interactive discussions on a specific challenge. In the short term, we hope that these Geneva security debates will help inform, provide new insights, stimulate joint reflections, and also create new networks among policymakers and experts in Geneva and beyond. In the long term, we are a bit more ambitious. We hope that these debates will allow us to shape a better and a more secure global future. So thank you very much for joining us for today's Geneva security debate. I would now, at the outset, like to extend my gratitude to our distinguished panel. First of all, of course, to you, Minister, but also to Ambassador Abdul-Karim Hashim, Laurent Sierro, a familiar face here, fortunately, at the GCSP, a long-time fellow, and our own Christina Shori-Liang for joining us today on this panel. And thanks to Paul Jakovich for assuming the role of moderator. As Paul has indicated, we have the opportunity today to explore not only an interesting topic, but a topic I'm sure will grow in importance as the communication revolution continues and other technological developments will advance. As we have seen throughout history, media and other methods of communication can be used for good, but also for bad. In the worst case, they can encourage war, they can even encourage genocide, helping to spread hate and calcify public opinion. And this is true not only within fragile or conflict-prone states. I think we've seen from the First World War on, more than a century ago, to the war between Russia and Ukraine today, that media have been systematically used to dehumanize the other and to maintain public support for the continuation of armed conflict, the continuation of war. Therefore, because of the dangers, but also because of the opportunities that media and new communication methods present, it is essential that those interested in peace and security strengthen their knowledge of how media and other forms of communication can best be deployed in peace-building processes, be it in conflict-sensitive countries or in face of broader international security challenges. Today, I look forward to learning from our visiting dignitaries and experts about their perspectives on how both governmental and non-governmental institutions can strengthen reconciliation efforts and peace-building processes through communication. What role do the media and communication play in reconciliation efforts and peace-building processes? What are the challenges to dialogue as a peace-building tool between different groups, be it in Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and elsewhere? How can young people and experts working in the field of peace-building operations, how can they be supported? These and other questions, I hope, we will be able to address today. Today's event provides an important opportunity for governmental and non-governmental institutions, civil society organizations, experts and workers in international and regional organizations in Europe, in the Middle East and North Africa to come together to learn and to identify common priorities, common challenges, common opportunities. But perhaps more than anything, today's session presents an opportunity to highlight the importance of dialogue in diverse societies and in an increasingly diverse world. This is something we must not forget once we leave this room and return to our daily lives. Indeed, dialogue is something that we promote vigorously here at our center, at the GCSP, together with my colleague Paul Jakovic on stage. He leads one of our two departments dedicated to building greater mutual trust, understanding and peace in today's world, the Peace and Mediation Support Department. We have just recently created a second department that runs some of our dialogue tracks, that is called International Security Dialogue Department. And I'm very happy that we have managed over the last 2 years to build up a portfolio of informal dialogue tracks. We currently run about 16 by the two departments. Without further ado, allow me now to turn the floor over to Ambassador Abdul-Karim Hashim to share some further reflections. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
So, as I don't have the privilege to have my mobile mic, I will focus on this one. First of all, allow me to present my thanks and gratitude to GCSP to organizing this very important event, dealing with a very important issue, the role of media in conflict resolution, with a special focus on Middle East and on Iraq especially, and having the privilege to have Minister Al-Muayed with us to reflect the point of view of Iraqi Communication Council regarding this very important issue. And as I again have the privilege to have a simultaneous translation from Arabic, let me switch to my national language. السيد رئيس هيئة الإعلام والاتصالات الدكتور علي المؤيد.
Your Excellency, the Director of the Geneva Centre for Security Policy, Ambassador Muayed. Director of the Geneva Centre for Security Policy, Your Excellency Thomas Gramingo, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests. It is my pleasure to participate in this important event and to express my gratitude and appreciation to the GCSP for its efforts in promoting international and regional security, peace building, knowledge dissemination, and skill development. Iraq's relationship with the center began after 2003, as it provided many specialized training courses and workshops for diplomats and national entities to build their capacities in aspects related to security policies, especially those for specialized topics in international and regional security. We have worked together to develop and implement the center's training capacity building, knowledge exchange, and experience sharing, and to further the collaboration with Iraq, as well as to stress this. For this purpose, we joined the founding council of this center in May of this year. We look forward to developing closer ties with the council to exchange expertise in diplomacy, current security challenges, and continuing cooperation in pursuit of peace, development, dignified living, and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the international situation is constantly changing and facing major global risks and challenges, including the spread of terrorism in large parts of the world. It's being exploited terrorism is exploiting scientific and technological development to fulfill its goals, and in conflicts, as well as the illegal migration, financial crimes, drugs, and other international problems. These have had a direct impact on the development, security, and peace, the rule of law, and the sound management of the environment. All these have increased the importance of solving global problems through cooperation between the countries and people of the world, as well as establishing clear foundations for this cooperation in non-traditional ways, in a manner that would guarantee the establishment of an effective system of collective security. It has become an urgent necessity to face the changes of international scene through security, economic and social integration. In 2014, Iraq faced a formidable terrorist attack through the terrorist organization known as ISIS. Thanks to national efforts involving security forces, popular mobilization, and the Peshmerga forces, which joined forces with international coalition, ISIS was defeated and militarily vanquished. In 2017. Furthermore, and in addition to the military effort, international cooperation to support counter-terrorism programs was added to our efforts. We have sought to confront its dangers by continuing to cooperate in exchanging information about terrorist groups, their members, and pursuing them, as well as attempts to dry up the sources of terrorism. And Iraq seeks to achieve the sustainability of this victory by addressing the root causes of terrorism for a long time. This has been done politically, economically, and socially, as we believe that addressing the root causes of conflict paves the way for lasting peace and sustainable peace. The Iraqi government is working to rebuild the cities liberated from ISIS and to follow up the files on the displaced to restore stability to the liberated areas through the implementation of a series of projects to rehabilitate infrastructure, clearing of landmines, cluster munitions, and war debris, and to help the victims by integrating the residents of the camps into society, and to provide a stable, sustainable, voluntary return for the displaced families. On the other hand, Iraq is one of the countries most affected by climate change. Iraq is active in international efforts to address climate change, water scarcity, and to achieve sustainable development goals in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. We were amongst the first countries to present a roadmap to achieve SDG goals for 2030 during the high-level political forum on sustainable development agenda in 2017. And we presented a second voluntary report in 2022. Distinguished guests, it's no secret that in the age of technological development that we live in, the media can be a positive force. Their role, alongside with international and national efforts, may help achieve stability and build peace by promoting mutual understanding and constructive communication between individual societies and governments. Here, I would like to highlight the role of Iraqi Media and Communications Authority and its efforts to achieve reconciliation, stability, and peace. It is its pivotal role in building a national unity by promoting and strengthening a culture of peace and tolerance, raising awareness and education to avoid the spread of rumors and misinformation, as well as raising awareness of dangers, extremism, violence, the importance of preserving national unity, strengthening the spirit of citizenship, highlighting common values of all Iraqi communities, and providing a space for freedom of opinion and expression, conveying facts and promoting understanding, dialogue, peaceful coexistence, and equality between the members of society, and supporting efforts to build peace and reconciliation. I conclude my speech by saying that media power has become an effective tool that plays an important role in achieving the goals of foreign policy and preserving national interests. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Abdul-Karim Hashim Mustafa, for your presentation and for outlining some of the key challenges your government has needed to work through in the last few years, and also some of the big achievements that you've had in that time. Also, thank you for reminding us that we have a 20-year relationship, our 20-year anniversary of our relationship. Sounds like a good time to have a Geneva security debate to celebrate 20 years together. I'll now introduce our next speaker, Minister Ali Al-Muayed, who will be presenting his work as the head of the Communication and Media Commission in the Republic of Iraq since 2021. He also served as member of the Higher Committee for Information Security in Iraq. Minister Al-Muayed will be posted as Iraq's representative to the Council of Arab Media Ministers and Iraq's representative in the Executive Office of the Council of Arab Information Ministers. He has also been editor-in-chief of a number of Iraqi media agencies. Please, Minister, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a clarification and a request. Prior to our arrival in Geneva, a distressful, painful event occurred in Iraq. At a wedding, a fire broke out and more than 100 persons fell victim at that event. And my country, through the Prime Minister, declared a 3 days mourning. So may I request my dear brothers and sisters here to stand a minute of silence on the souls of the poor victims. Your Excellency Ambassador Abdul-Karim Al-Hashim, permanent representative of Iraq to the United Nations in Geneva, distinguished Board of Directors of the Geneva Centre for Security Policy, Your Excellencies, respected heads and members of diplomatic delegations and international organizations, honorable presence, or with all due respect, dear friends and representatives of the media. It is a great pleasure for me to present to you the greetings of the people and nation of Iraq, civil society organizations and all media organizations. Words of peace I bear to you from our noble Iraqi nation, a society of law, history, literature, and authenticity. I also convey to you the greetings of His Excellency Prime Minister Engineer Mohammed Zia Al-Sudani and his sincere wishes for the success of this meeting. We are honored to respond to your kind invitation aimed at empowering international efforts to achieve peace and coexistence among all humanity, particularly the serious attempts to end conflict and disputes in the world, the Middle East and North Africa specifically. Dear present audience, conflicts based on fanaticism, extremism, and terrorism, and the intellectual and psychological struggles and the conflict of interests as well as sectarian conflicts have led to serious outcomes. They affected humanity and the rules of sound reasons. They have determined how to control conflicts. And despite the importance of political and international and efforts that were made to negotiate and mediate, however, this path remains to be a long one. Continuing efforts to include solidarity and to control disagreement between nations has impeded the application of the principles of justice and humanity. Iraq has striven to establish peace and to overcome conflict between all members of Iraqi society. We have done so basing ourselves on our history and cultural background to solve the many struggles and conflicts we have faced over the past 20 years. And after having overcome the ISIS era, we are now seeking to find peace and security for our beloved country. The Communication and Media Commission, on the basis of its constitutional and legal foundations, has sought to spread a culture of forgiveness, to spread freedoms, and to adhere to the rules of democracy for which the people of Iraq have spent many a year and decade to uphold. We have sought, in fact, to establish equality between all nations, to create a nation free of extremism, struggle, and conflict and counter-conflict. Under the presence of our Prime Minister, Mr. Al-Sudani, have sought to uphold the freedom of media and provide all facilities to the press and to the media, as we are convinced that the media and their institutions play a seminal role in bringing about development and social development. His Excellency, the PM, has interacted with the media and has to assist and facilitate their presence, as he believes in their role to convey the voice of the citizen to the government and to convey ours to the public. We have provided special assistance and support to in enhancing freedoms. We have provided support to all the members of the media and provided facilitations which help them in their activities. Distinguished participants, the society and our commission has sought to create a creative environment for journalism in its various traditional and modern trends after ending decades of dictatorial hegemony over the rule of Iraq that ended in 2003, during which only a small number of media outlets were allowed to work in the country, and all of them were forced to, in connection with the previous repressive regime, to operate only through communication with the authorities. At the time, only 2 channels were allowed to broadcast. Now, more than 150 local radio stations exist, approximately 57 satellite channels, as well as offices for 47 foreign satellite channels and dozens of news agencies. Our commission, after the year 2003, has also worked to inaugurate a set of principles and basic rules that enhance the freedom of the press in the country and limit everything that hinders their work, as it is an essential element in strengthening democracy. Iraq may be considered one of the few countries in the Middle East in which print newspapers do not require a prior license to operate. The Commission also worked to provide financial support to the Iraqi media by finding settlements for their financial debts in exchange for broadcasting advertisements on topics related to energy, water, security, and human rights. This was the largest support for these institutions since the founding of the Iraqi state, which approximately amounts to $40 million US. Despite our absolute belief that the Media and Communication Authority are essential, except they do not provide the necessary protection against attacks against the privacy of others or the abuse of children, women, and the elderly or people with disabilities. So we have sought to support these groups in various manners. We have sought to prevent the abuse, to prevent and track the abuse inflicted on these groups and stop it through the approved legal context. In this context, the Communication and Media Commission, in cooperation with a number of institutions, has provided exceptional support to empower women politically and to limit any abuse that may be caused to female candidates for the parliamentary elections in 2021, and this through media institutions operating in the country. This is something we shall maintain and preserve at the forthcoming elections for government elections. In Iraq, we have worked to transform many of the basic principles of the press freedom into a practical reality on the ground through agreements and understandings with a large number of state institutions. In 2021, the Supreme Judicial Council, represented by its president, Dr. Faiq Zidan, responded to the request of the Media and Communications Commission not to prosecute, arrest, or charge those in charge of managing media institutions, and that they are not responsible for their actions. Only the institution is only responsible for legal violations. This is aimed at creating a safe environment for journalists to work and carry out their work freely in accordance with the Iraqi constitution. The Commission also strengthened the work of organizations concerned with defending the freedom of journalists, creating an effective partnership between media and the law. This will enhance the legal culture among workers in the media field. The Commission also encouraged the media to work to promote civil participation, integrity, state sovereignty, and the law, as well as to support human development through a number of coordination initiatives between the media on the one hand and official institutions on the other. We have concluded an agreement with the Federal Integrity Commission the official institution for responsible monitoring and corrupting files in the country, we have concluded an agreement to enhance the necessary national efforts in supporting integrity and combating corruption in its various forms, which is an affirmation of the importance of the media. We also are seeking to provide training programs through seminars, workshops, and scientific and experimental sessions to help Iraq and the media to create a generation which is well informed on integrity, impartiality, and peace. We also are seeking to uphold women and defend and protect women, children, and the disabled by providing them with special facilities and seeking, in fact, to create a qualitative media. We wish to reaffirm our relationship with the other media institutions, public and private, is a complementary and harmonious one. We are, in fact, witness to their sacrifices in promoting democracy, combating terrorism, and achieving societal harmony. We wish to emphasize the role in breaking political bottlenecks and resolving urgent conflicts and conveying the citizens' voice to decision-making circles of our faith. They adhere to national and professional principles. Finally, we extend our highest levels of gratitude to your sponsorship of this important meeting and invite you to other valuable conferences that work to confirm these conscious programs and foster access to the principles of professional media and a safe society and the lasting peace. May God's peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you.
Thank you, Minister Ali Al-Muayed, for your remarks and for setting out the important work, the recent work of your commission. Now we will move to our panel discussion, and I would like to kindly ask that the Minister and Your Excellency, the Ambassador, please join us here on stage. And I will also introduce now our other panelists here. We have Dr. Christina Shori-Liang, who leads our GCSP work on violent extremism and preventing violent extremism. She also runs courses at GCSP on transnational organized crime, terrorism, and new technologies. She has written articles and edited several books on international security and is an adjunct faculty member of the Paris School of International Affairs, Sciences Po. We also have Mr. Laurent Sierot, who is an associate fellow of the Global Fellowship Initiative at the GCSP. He's worked as a journalist for over a decade and is the United Nations and economic correspondent in Geneva for the Swiss news agency ATS. He's also contributed to multiple news agencies, including the Courrier International, as well as Le Monde, Slate Afrique, and La Cité. His reporting has taken him to a number of places affected by violent conflict, including the Democratic Republic of Congo, Gaza, Ukraine, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So let's now begin the panel. And the first question would be for Ambassador Abdul-Karim. Ambassador, in this international city and its multilateral institutions, you're the face of Iraq. You represent a country that has been through the most difficult of times. It was, in recent decades, a center of not just regional but global attention for all the wrong reasons: war, terrorism, mass displacement and refugee flows, devastating climate change, and other hardships. In recent times, though, Iraq seems to have put itself on a relatively more positive trajectory with regard to some of these problems. Regionally, there are also a lot of changes underway. There's still much conflict and much human suffering, but there are also positive developments. Rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, two of your big neighbors, as well as between other sets of adversaries in the region. extraordinary economic advances in the Gulf, just to name a few. And of course, the global geopolitical situation is shifting fast. Some big powers are becoming less involved in your region. Others are becoming more involved in your region. Now, in this environment of change and flux, both internationally and regionally and within Iraq, how would you describe as the ambassador the new role or the new profile of your country in the Middle East?
Hello. Well, thank you so much for this very important question, I can say. And as I see, there is still a simultaneous translation. I will go on in Arabic. في الحقيقة
As a matter of fact, I wish to thank you for for posing this important question. Iraq, and since decades, since the beginning of the 80s, has witnessed all forms of conflict as known. Foreign conflicts with other countries, internal conflicts among the local components like the Kurds, the central government, conflicts with other foreign forces. We've been exposed to some attack by an alliance of 30 countries. A very strong opposition at the domestic level. There are also some internal conflicts. So all those external and internal conflicts have polished the Iraqi officials in the Iraqi government and in the institutions of civil society and the NGOs that are representing all components of the Iraqi people made Iraq to go through such experiences which has proven that internal and external conflicts can never be militarily solved. At the end and after each and every external or internal conflict, all parties will, they used to stay and sit at the negotiating table. So we are fully and firmly convinced, and it is in the DNA of the Iraqi approach, is that the negotiations are the best tool for solving and resolving these conflicts. In all cases, Iraq has always proven that the people are so authentic, and they have been impacted by long struggles and long conflicts. And of course, it has negatively impacted it in terms of economics, but on the other hand, it strengthened the Iraqi character in order to deal with internal and external conflicts. And by virtue of Iraq's location and the fact that we are neighboring important countries in the Middle East, and we can see that some countries have problems with other countries. So we have benefited from this experience. So by virtue of our geographical location and situation, and knowing that dialogue is the ultimate tool for conflict resolution, We have reviewed and we have suggested these approaches to the neighboring countries because dialogue in the region will have a positive impact on the partners in the dialogue and on Iraq, because Iraq is living at the center of this region. We are in the middle between Iran and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Iraq has direct borders with Turkey, over 600 kilometers. We have borders with Syria, we have borders with Jordan. So anything that takes place in these countries will have an impact on us. So it's in the interest of Iraq to convey our experience and in a dialogue to those countries. Fortunately enough, we have excellent relations with all the neighboring countries, in contrast with the 80s, where we had conflicts with all our neighbors. But today, we are having a dialogue with all our neighbors. And despite the complicated and the complex history, so we have suggested our assistance, our mediation, our help in order to start a dialogue between KSA and Iran. And actually, there has been a session of dialogue. And today we can see that they have exchanged ambassadors between Iran and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Moreover, there are other problems in the region. We have a privileged relationship with Syria, and despite all what has taken place in Syria, Iraq has always had very good relations with Syria, and the Iraqi embassy in Damascus has always been open. And now we are looking into restoring Syria to the League of Arab States, and we can do the same and play the same role with Turkey and other countries in the region. Our former Prime Minister has launched the Baghdad Dialogue in its first version in 2020. And through that dialogue, all the neighboring countries met in Baghdad, Kuwait, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and even Emmanuel Macron has attended this session of dialogue. The same dialogue has been organized in Jordan later on. So now we are on the verge of having the third version of this dialogue at the end of October, if I can remember correctly, and in the presence of President Macron once again. So, with all the experience we have accumulated throughout these conflicts, we are playing the role of a moderator to enhance and to strengthen the culture of dialogue. I'll stop here, and I thank you very much. I have been quite lengthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for describing Iraq's important regional role in enabling, facilitating dialogue between important countries. of the region. We seem to have some common interest there, and I look forward to discussing with you further whether and how GCSP might be able to support some of these efforts. Now, on to Minister Al-Muayed. Minister, thank you so much again for your opening presentation, in which you mentioned the positive force that the media can be in promoting understanding, constructive discourse, and inclusivity. You've made some impressive progress so far, but given the diverse landscape in Iraq, the tensions, and the difficult recent past, how does the CMC strive to reconcile the diverse political opinions that still prevail in your country?
Thank you very much for this very important question. I believe in all the countries of the world that have faced changing circumstances, violent changes from a dictatorial to a democratic regime, from a repressive regime, a stringent one, to an open democratic regime where we see a peaceful transition of power and new ideas. Our experience is still a recent and young one. This involves all sectors of society, the government, the organization, all the country. We are all maturing together in this new experience, in a new environment with a new vision, with new interaction. And all these factors require, in fact, maturity and maturing. Iraqi media play a role in strengthening democracy and entrenching it in the country through the peaceful exchange of power, elections, and to conveying the voice of the citizen to the authorities, to create a new Iraq, one different from the past, where the journalist and the citizen are sanctioned for the expression of their views or for putting forward any given opinion. So we play a major role. It's a new, young experience, liable to err, to stumble, to be injured, it may advance and fall back. However, it is an important experience. Over 20 years, from 23 to 2023, we have developed our abilities. At the beginning, in the media, we were faced a great deal of lack of order, ignorance of the legislation, or professional journalism and media behavior. Now it is an established, entrenched forms of journalism and media. It plays an important role in society. It plays a vital role in fact, solving conflicts. In all the, in fact, pivotal events in Iraq, media played an important role. The events in Hamdaniya, the last Wednesday, that very painful event, up till today, we have about 300 outlets in the media. All the media forces, in fact, joined their efforts and sought to convey this tragedy and convey the feelings of the victims and to help the state in providing services and to overcome this crisis. In combating terrorism and combating ISIS, Iraqi media played a very important role. And I can give you a figure. We have about 500 martyrs and representatives of the media. And they were actually in the front line in the struggle against ISIS, next to the security and government forces, defending their country, not only by word and pen, but also they, in fact, sacrificed themselves. These are very important. One day, Al-Qaeda sought to control the streets of Baghdad and to, in fact, counter all those who went out to express free opinions. However, the media here and our friends played an important role. At every point of conflict and period of conflict, they have played an important role so that Iraq may, in fact, pursue its progress and not submit to hegemony and repression and sectarianism. So the past 2 decades, in my opinion, represent an important experience as we matured our institutions and our society in the building up of our organizations, civil society, and helping us to give a different image of Iraq. We may commit mistakes. Conflicts and differences of opinion may occur. However, the media constantly sought for a solution rather than the problem. The presence of sectors, sectarianisms, communities, and nationalities. In fact, we are a multifarious and multi-language and culture society. This gives rise to conflicts or frictions. However, we have organizations and authorities that help us to reach solutions. Now there is a clear understanding that all parties must have their own means and media, and any Iraqi citizen may have his own media. The Kurd, the Shiite, the Sabaean, the Turkmen, all of them may have their own media through which they may put forward their views, their expectations, their dreams, their projects, and any demands they seek from the authorities and their social partners. So there is a great deal of respect here. A few days ago, we had an event, the Arbaini event, a religious event, where more than 1,500 representatives of the press attended. And there was a very impressive stand from all the religious segments and sectors who took part in this event. To counter that, a few days ago, we had another event, a celebration for the Sunnis, as we were celebrating the Prophet's birthday, the Mawlid. And here, once again, they joined us in celebrating our Prophet's birthday. So this means, thanks to its history and its civilization and what it had established and created within its own framework, it has been able to solve its social problems. And this has, in fact, reflected the desire of the Iraqi people to live together, coexistence, and that their differences may be restricted to the political framework, and that these may solve their problems through law and through the appropriate means. This, in my view, is a major development. And in fact, all parties must carefully consider this development in the Iraqi experience, because it is a positive one and may in fact be replicated in other areas in the Middle East and North Africa and areas of conflict in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for that very thoughtful response. Now we will zoom out a bit from Iraq, and I'll pose a question to Mr. Sierro. As an international reporter, you've worked in a number of conflict zones, including, as I said before, DR Congo and Bosnia. What do you think is and should be the role of media in reducing tensions in such places? And how might governments play a constructive role in managing the difficult balance of allowing a liberal media, free speech, while preventing also the inflammatory excesses that we sometimes see play out through the media, particularly in these conflict environments?
Thank you, Paul, for the invitation. Let me at the outset make two things. First, to convey my condolences to the Iraqi people after the fire and to the relatives of the casualties. And thank you both as a fellow here at the GCSP and as a reporter. I say that because if you indulge me, I'll take my hat as fellow for 10 seconds just to congratulate Caroline Aboussada, the Executive Director of SOS Méditerranée. Caroline has sparked an initiative here at the GCSP, which is called the Center on Humanitarian Action at Sea. And the reason I mention that is that this morning, SOS Méditerranée was awarded the Right Livelihood Award, which is considered as the alternative Nobel Prize So that shows both the importance of the work of SOS Méditerranée and the importance of that new initiative at the GCSP. That said, back to the topic of the day. I could answer your question very shortly by saying that media have their own rules, constraints, habits, and their core job, which is to convey facts, to put them into perspective, to analyze them in order to enable the citizen to shape their opinion. And that we should restrict to that core job without asking ourselves whether we should have additional mandates or tasks. But obviously this would be too simplistic. And I think there you have the same requirements for media outlets that you would have for humanitarian or development actors. That means that the more you're going to be considered as a trusted bona fide stakeholder, the more you'll be able to have a positive influence on both conflict resolutions on the short term and peace building on the longer term. And basically, there are three possible scenarios for media in a tension-prone situation, which are either you're an observer, or you're a militant for good or for bad, or you're a target. The more you'll be considered leaning towards an observer, the more your ability to contribute to peace will be greater. So I think that's an important factor. The thing is that we shouldn't self-censor ourselves just thinking about what might be the consequences for peace building, because once again, our core task is to disclose violation when they happen, to go to the ground, to speak about what's happening there, even if it's difficult to hear for some stakeholders. Because if we don't do that, then you might end up with unaddressed grievances on the longer term that might be even worse to settle afterwards by the different stakeholders. But then we have to ask ourselves whether we should restrict to a conflict-sensitive attitude, being sure that you know exactly, you make a strong conflict analysis, you know exactly what is the situation, why you're going to cover it, or whether we can do more and have what the Interpeace here in Geneva would call a peace-responsive behavior. That means, there are studies, for instance, in Colombia during the peace process that showed that even during the talks, the media, either local or regional or international, tending to have a narrative much more on war than on peace. And some even say that that might have led to the no at the referendum at the end of the day in 2016. So still no censorship, but we should ask ourselves whether we have also room to convey commonalities, what's working when you are in a country where the divisions are along the sectarian factors, in which situation, and above all at the local level, the different communities manage to tackle common issues by talking to themselves. Because at the end of the day, media will never make peace. That's going to be the leaders and the societies. But media reflect what's at stake within the societies. So you have to find some models that can convey these commonalities. And that's also true, I think, in terms of structures. If you look at what Fondation Hirondelle managed to do in Africa, in different countries, they managed to position the local media with local journalists that they launched as the #1 trusted media in the different countries. And some of the reason is that it's because it goes beyond the sectarian divide. It includes everyone, including in the way you constitute your newsroom. That means that you're going to have people from different communities working together and learning also to convey narratives from other groups. So when we come to talk about MENA region, and when you talk to diplomats who are involved in either in mediation or conflict resolution there, they often say, look, the landscape in the different countries has been traditionally characterized by these sectarian media outlets, and we're still waiting for that success story in terms of intercommunal newsrooms. So in Iraq, there have been some attempts, and I would be glad to hear what the minister thinks about the kind of projects like Radio Al-Muayed in Basra, or like Radio Nawa in the Kurdish territories, where you manage to put some intercommunal components of newsroom together and try not only to convey the message of your own community, but also to try to interest yourself in what the other communities have to say. And then the most important, I would say, for all that process to be successful is the conditions that reporters have to do their job. And there, let me quote, for instance, let me take the example of Yemen, and let me quote one of the leaders of Ansar Allah, one of the Al-Houthi brothers, I think it's Abdul-Bakr, who said in 2016, media workers are more dangerous than the nationalists and than the warring mercenaries. So you can see it's not conducive to a safe environment to work, but even on a broader note, if you think about what could be the contribution of reporters in such an environment, you will see that they're going to be quite fast disqualified, because they're going to be perceived as the enemy because of that kind of narrative rather than the solution. So I think governments, and that brings me to the second part of your question, governments have to work on that, as the minister said. They are the guardians of an inclusive, diversified ecosystem for the reporters. I know that the Commission a few months ago drafted a regulation which was criticized by some NGO on digital content. Look, as a reporter, what I have to say about that is that I will never be in favor of principal restrictions of fundamental freedoms. Then if you have to do that for security reasons, these restrictions should be time-bound, should be proportionate, should be non-discriminatory, because at the area of social networks, we could see that in Libya as well, we know with the bots, with the massive attacks and fake news on social networks, it's a difficult task. But, you know, fighting against inflammatory speech should never mean restrict peaceful demonstrations, for instance. Should never mean restrict the space for dissent and critics to express themselves and being conveyed through the media. So I think that's the task of the government. And then for the social networks, because we don't want to have another Radio Mille Collines who really played a great role in fueling the genocide in Rwanda. Nor we don't want to have another situation like more recently, like in Myanmar, where the monks use social networks like Facebook to spread hate speech. So the task, I think, of the government is to provide the conditions. Then the task of the service providers is to really monitor that situation. And the media have also a responsibility in not amplifying, not fueling this discourse, this narrative of hate speech and inflammatory speeches.
Thank you very much, Laurent Sierro. Some delicate balancing acts there, and that's why these conversations are so important also. I'll move on to Dr. Shori Liang. Dr. Shori Liang, you're an expert on extremism and preventing violent extremism. We often see certain societal groups left out of important national projects, including the youth, which can then trigger extremism. what would you say that states and international organizations and NGOs can and should do to help support young people in their efforts to promote peace building? And, you know, I hate to be the last speaker on any panel because you always get told to keep it short. So I'm sorry to give you that challenge also.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And also, I would like to offer my condolences to the people of Iraq for this tragedy. What should have been a really day of pure joy and happiness, a marriage, really turned into a very sad and devastating event. So I also wanted to say something that perhaps none of you know, that today is the International Day for Universal Access to Information. So it's the International Federation of Journalists who have declared this day. And so I think one of the first messages that I wanted to say is, well, thank you so much for this event. We really, really appreciate your coming here and sharing all the work that you've been doing. But I think overall, one of the most important things to bring youth into the picture and to give them access is that first and foremost, it's important that governments respect the right to know. All governments should support the universal access to information because it is an integral part of the right of freedom of expression. And in fact, it's enshrined in the Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So it includes the right to seek, receive, and impart information through any media, regardless of frontiers. So if young people feel that their rights are being trampled on and that they do not have access to information, this weakens them and it makes them less law-abiding. We've seen that in the past. It leads them to extremism. It makes them vulnerable to the voices of extremist groups. And so feeling or getting people, young people, to feel that they have the right to know, the right to access to information, can help them to build greater resilience. Also, respecting the right to know and access to open information can benefit young people in the ways of peace building and reconciliation, because with the right to know, with the knowledge, it builds education and an awareness, and it helps young people to access a wide range of perspectives that is really crucial for them to understand the conflict and understand the context and why it arose. Open information can also serve as a basis for informed and constructive dialogue. As we have heard today, dialogue is one of the most critical tools in preventing and helping to find a peace and stabilization. So young people should have access to balanced information. And in many conflict situations, misinformation and propaganda help to fuel hatred and division. So open information can act as a counterbalance by providing fact-based resources and debunking false narratives. And this also is important for projecting objective reporting, as you highlighted. So transparency and information sharing can help build trust, where young people see that information is shared openly and fairly, and it can also build a sense of transparency and in the fairness in the peace process. So young people also have very innovative ideas. I think young people are probably the most innovative thinkers on the planet, and they offer fresh perspectives that can be very valuable to peace building. So open information empowers them to participate actively in peace initiatives, and this helps them to create ideas for reconciliation and conflict resolution. So this can also be supported by IOs and NGOs. I hope I was brief enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you to all the panelists for these rich responses. And, you know, we started a bit late, so I think we can go over time a little bit. And I would like to open the floor for Q&A. Who would like to ask a question of any of our panelists? Please.
Merci, Président. Comme la majorité des participants parlent la langue arabe, je veux profiter et parler en arabe, si vous permettez. OK. ميرسي أمباسادور جرينجر وشكرا
I thank Ambassador Gramingo and the Embassy of Iraq for this event. I am Dr. Ali Al-Muayed, the chair of the Strategic Study Center. I work from Geneva and Beirut. When we consider the crises in the MENA or in the world, we find that the reason for such a crisis is the absence of dialogue or the, in fact, exclusion of dialogue. All the crises in the world, in fact, are due to the absence of dialogue or the culture of dialogue. As a research center, we have monitored this phenomenon, and we held 2 international conferences at the University of Geneva regarding the role of media and the culture of dialogue. In 2015, at the University of Geneva, we declared the Geneva Declaration on the Culture of Dialogue. I, in fact, chaired one of the debates here at the GCSP when Ambassador Tanner was the director, and it dealt with the media and humanitarian law. So I wish, once again, would like to stress the importance of the culture of dialogue to build peace and to rebuild national reconciliation, says the speaker in French. Allow me 2 minutes to stress several points. The 9th article of this declaration states that the media must disseminate the culture of democracy, which reinforces dialogue far from extremism or factionalism. Article 10 of this declaration states or refers to the seminal role of the culture of citizenship and human rights. I would like to stress also to the tragic reality in MENA and the humanitarian heritage of those regions. The media must strive to build citizenship and humanitarian values. And this is what is stated in Article 23. Article 25 states that the UN, and here I call on the UN to draft a document that would impose sanctions or impede or ban the media that, in fact, prevents dissemination of opinion. Article 26 refers to the need to strengthen dialogue and its culture, in a balanced culture in multi-ethnic countries, and is important, and its absence is and its existence is what shall enable the building of peace. At that seminar held here in Geneva recently, celebrating 75 years of Human Rights Declaration, I called on the Commissioner for Human Rights to include the right to dialogue amongst human rights, to include right to dialogue as part of human rights could lead to the building of peace in multicultural, multi-ethnic societies and countries. I would like to conclude by saying that the articles of the Geneva Declaration must be, in fact, taught in institutions and academies. The peace cannot be built in a short period of time. It can be built through education and culture and media. So, in fact, such instruments must be inculcated from a very early age, as this will establish the foundations for peace and dialogue.
So I think we have the UN, they can take on that challenge. I'll leave it to you. Please, the next question.
À tous, Hicham Lemisi pour le GPRI, Secretary of GPRI, yes, Geneva International Peace Research Institute. سعادة السفير، السلام عليكم على الجميع. I have a question in English. Iraqi national identity was built on Arab nationalist identity, ideology in the past. And now, after invasion of Iraq, civil war, and emergence of confessionalism and regionalism, what levers are used to rehabilitate a strong national identity? What levers, mediatical levers, political levers? Thank you.
Okay, is there one more, and then we'll go to the panelists, please.
Thank you very much. I will raise only one question, but I will share a short and a concise and a clear comment at the beginning of my intervention. My name is Riyad Bazia. I'm working with the United Nations in Geneva since more than 20 years ago. I did short term as a consultant, but I am mainly involved with the International Civil Society, the former NGOs Coordination Office, and the NGOs effort. It is a complement for the state members' work. Anyway, Iraq as a country, it used to be global attention more than legal attention at the end of the last century. Because Iraq got global attention, then it got local and regional attention. But anyway, as His Excellency he said, since the 18th. So water and sanitation, healthcare, pollution, biodiversity. In the United Nations, when we were talking about biodiversity and climate change, we are mainly thinking in this region until the international community adopted the international framework on climate change and the international framework on biodiversity. Even if it didn't adopt it in this region, it had been adopted in another part of the region. And we see how much nowadays the international negotiations are more crucial in climate change. But since more than 20 years ago, then 10 years, 12 years ago, here in GCSP, we organized also a session on promoting peace in Middle East, thanks to biodiversity. And here we are mainly discussion on conflict resolution and the media. Laurent, he mentioned the story about Mille Collines in Rwanda, but in that time, the internet just started or didn't start it yet. But nowadays we are living in new area on new technologies. And here I arrive to my own question to Mr. Al-Muayed. Nowadays, we are living ICTs, information communication technologies, and how much the new technologies are more important for media and communications in various countries, various communities, and Switzerland, it is confederation. And there is more communities in Switzerland than in Iraq. Yeah. How much nowadays ICTs are very useful to build a peace building, peacekeepers, to establish peace, thanks to those also applications or communications, various types nowadays. And in the Iraq, how do you see nowadays to establish some programs, local programs or applications, the access for tools? Nowadays in the Pacific Ocean, the farthest island, they have access to internet and the device. Since 10 years ago with the smartphone or iPhone, anyway, anybody can have access. I think in Iraq, it's not anymore very expensive. How do you see to promoting peace thanks to those new application and new technologies? And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we have 5 minutes, and I would like to perhaps hear some answers to these two questions. The one was on the rehabilitation of Iraqi identity in this post-turmoil period, and then on the role of ICT as a tool in building peace. Minister, would you like to attempt an answer?
شكرا لكم.
Thank you. Regarding the national identity, the single or unified national identity in Iraqi society, we are not a recent or accidental society. We're a society with a long history. We are the seat and the cradle of three civilizations, Persian and Arab and Turkish. We are an independent civilization which enjoys all the foundations of originality and authenticity. The crises that happened to Iraq were in fact accidental and emergent, and our very presence, in fact, and our identity are greater than such crises. Most of these crises have a political origin. We are a tribal and society, and in our society there are blood relations in the very structure, be it a Kurd, a Sunni or Shiite, a multi-ethnicity, a multi-faith. This has not prevented, in fact, the building of networking in all social dimensions. The struggles and crises and conflicts on the political level, had they not been political, they would have disappeared. We are a strong society. There's a great deal of solidarity amongst us. And this is why the Iraqi identity has withstood all crises. And if we were not such a strong society, we would not have withheld and resisted. All the crises, in fact, sought to undermine the society. Our human resources, i.e., there was a murder, a killing machine, in fact, massacring all the sections and sectors of society and all its factions. And this was being done through the henchmen of the Ba'ath Society, through Al-Qaeda. And you know that Al-Qaeda is a world terrorist organization, and in fact sought to undermine Iraqi society, and through ISIS. The whole purpose was in fact to uproot and undermine and eliminate the society. However, we are now determined to create a democratic society. The Iraqi society, in fact, sought and did overcome these challenges. And when I say that media in Iraq were, in fact, an important balancing power, I do not know if the media existed or did not exist in Rwanda. In Iraq, we had few media channels at the beginning and during the Saddam era, which also sought, in fact, to inflame, in fact, factional frictions. However, they were totally rejected, and these do not exist. These forms of media do not exist because Iraqi society refuses such measures to inflame crisis or to create crisis and frictions. When frictions exist, they draw the political side. Our colleague said the political side solves the crisis and the media and society follow. In fact, society is the one that can bring the political side to reconciliation and to solve its problems. Media, in fact, are a reflection of society and of political decision. So when there are balanced efforts and parallel efforts, media then will be able to build a single national identity. We have a party, political parties have their own media. Civil society have their own channels in the media. All the businessmen and the economic enterprises and entities all have their channels. However, they steer clear from factionalism, racism, hatred speech, non-respect of the other. We have genuine social experiences in the media where we measure the degree of solidarity in the Iraqi society, and they all showed that we are a strong society and we are able, in fact, to impose our will to the political side. And all components of society are very well aware of the importance of the media in development and their ability to, in fact, to reflect the image of the society internally and externally. And these must not seek, in fact, to make enemies. We, in fact, seek to enrich freedoms and not restrict them. Media are used to, in fact, serve social cohesion. I believe this presence of the media is excellent. Errors may be committed here and there because of the various opinions and views. However, the existence of this foundation, and which operates under all the various media umbrellas, does indeed help to entrench a national identity that, in fact, brings together all the segments of society, such as the mother who, in fact, holds together and embraces all factions and prevents the existence of second-class citizens. All citizens are first-class citizens as per our constitution and our social cohesion.
Minister, now over to the Ambassador, Your Excellency. Any final additional thoughts before we conclude? Over to you.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much. I believe that His Excellency Minister Al-Muayed, in his last statement, in fact, dealt with all aspects and dimensions. So I shall content myself with Dr. Al-Muayed's statements and words, and I simply wish to address my thanks to the GCSP for hosting this important event. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. So now we come to the end of our Geneva security debate. Before I close again, I would like to thank our partners that I mentioned before in helping make this event a reality. I would also like to thank those who've worked behind the scenes to make this possible. They include Ms. Asma Abdullah, Ms. Mareva Redui, and Ms. Emanuela Lamorte, our Marcom team here at GCSP, our technical team at GCSP, and all of those of you who have come to attend our debate. We're very happy to see you all here, and many of you for not the first time. Thank you for being with us again. We'll keep you posted of all our upcoming Geneva security debates on our website and via social media. And before I hand over to Ms. Ahlam Al-Husseini, representative of the Iraqi Foundation for Foreign Policies, for the next part of our event, I would like to thank you all and conclude this Geneva security debate. But before you all leave the room, I will give the floor, as I said, to Ms. Ahlam Al-Husseini. Please. Over to you, and that concludes the debate part of the event. Thank you.
And on the basis of that goal, our foundation was set up, and it sought to, in fact, rationalize decision-making in foreign policy and to assist scientific and academic research into foreign policy. We have also undertook several activities through debates held in Iraq, which concentrated attention on the need to involve youth and to, in fact, train staff and specialists in Iraqi foreign policy through, in fact, investing in youth and all those concerned with foreign policy. We have sought, in fact, to involve youth in all our efforts. We have undertaken several studies and analyses for solutions to regional and international problems. We have submitted recommendations to those institutions. Today, we are speaking of the media and its importance and the diversity of means arising out of the various media platforms. We and our foundation are responsible to support and endorse freedom of opinion, in addition to establishing sound foundations which assist in the overall development of public opinion, to build foundations of a democratic society, to bring about a peace-loving society, to exclude extremist messages calling for violence and partisanship, and to build a peaceful society. The main feature of this society is the existence of women and their role in foreign policy. I believe they are a promising faction and a promising factor which will help to build a rational foreign policy based on Iraqi interests and on the basis what is stated in our constitution as a basis of foreign policy. Today, our presence here was very useful, and we hope we shall be with you in the future as well. Thank you for your kind attention.